Hi, welcome, my viewers in the US and worldwide. And this is Dr. Kim's Scholarship and Journey. I'm continuing in my series of the parables, and today I will present to you still a very different parable. It's called the parable of budding fig tree. Budding fig tree. This parable is actually quite different from the other parables that we have studied so far, such as the seed parables or tenant, because this parable apparently deals with the eschatology. Eschatology means things about the end. In other words, what would happen on the last day? What should people do until then? Things about the end, eschatology. So we would see that language about eschatology and people's concerns about eschatology. What should they do in the present life? This parable also deals with the difficult times of trials and injustices and turmoils. Things are going rough in society. You know what? People are desperate and they need hope. You know, the question is about theodicy, which means the justice of God. People begin to ask, where is God? Why bad things happen to good people? Why the bad people prosper? Theodicy, where is God? So this parable somehow deals with that time and issues. Then this parable probably was told for a purpose from the perspective of Jesus or from the Evangelists. The purpose would be, no matter what happens in such difficult times, people need to stay in the faith, right? Stay strong in their faith in God with patience, because eventually God will prevail. And in terms of the text of this parable, we see this parable is found in all three Gospels. And Mark is a bedrock parable, which has been used by Matthew and Luke. Matthew does not change Mark at all, so we see here the verbatim agreement, exactly the same parable, both in Mark and Matthew. But Luke changes a little bit. That's actually Lucan tendency. You know, Luke usually refines Markan material and sometimes omitting some part of the text for some reason that we do not know. But in this case, kind of we can guess why Luke does not, want this. For example, no one knows about the time. In Mark and Matthew, Jesus clearly says, about the last time, last hour, no one knows. Angels, even the Son, including himself, no one knows about the time. But Luke omits that part. Probably Luke does not, want its audience to know about such limited, Messiah Jesus. That's probably one reason. Otherwise, we don't know. But when we look at Mark and Matthew's Gospels, these Gospels are very, apocalyptic tone. It is apocalyptic Gospels, we can say. But Luke's Gospel, not very much apocalyptic tone, right? Luke has emphasis on today, in the here and now. So let's read what is said in Markan version of this parable. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see these things taking place, you know that he's near at the very gate. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. See here, Matthew, exactly the same. From the fig tree, learn, it's a lesson. As soon as the branch becomes tender, put forth leaves, you know that summer is near. Also, when you see all these things, you know that it's near at the very gate. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day and hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. It's interesting. This is because Matthew read Mark as a source, but decided not to change. Now, let's read the Lucan version of this parable. Then he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. Interesting. All the trees, right? Not only the fig tree, but look at all the trees. That's interesting. That's important, actually. Here, the important metaphor, in the parable is not a specific fig tree, but all the trees. A kind of a natural phenomena is discussed here. Not a single fig tree, particular type of a tree, but all the trees. See what happened, all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, right? All the trees. That's a natural phenomenon, not only fig tree. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves. Know that summer is already near, right? Emphasis, already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. It's interesting. Luke says what? The kingdom of God is near. It's already here in the now. In Matthew and Mark says, okay, he, the judge, the one who is coming on the last day, a person. But here in Luke says, not person, but the kingdom of God is near, which means the emphasis on the present day. God is working in the here and now. That is consistent with actually Lucan theology. For example, Luke 17, right? Jesus standing with the Pharisees who are asking Jesus, what kind of signs would we see on the last day? What kind of signs? But Jesus says, do not expect to see, things, glorious things, marvelous signs would appear in the sky. Don't say that the kingdom of God is here and there, right? The kingdom of God is not coming like that visual signs in the future. And Jesus says, the kingdom of God, the rule of God, the reign of God is already here. It's among you and within you. So Luke and Jesus clearly says, the kingdom of God is not a matter of a future, but the reality that people experience here and now. So the kingdom of God is among you or within you. That's marvelous. So consistent here in a way, here Jesus says, that the kingdom of God is near. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. As you see, otherwise, Luke does not copy things like no one knows, even angels in heaven or the Son, but just omitted that part. Just as you see here, very simple version of the parable. So we should have this kind of a warning, when we read this parable. Oftentimes people, misread the parable. For example, this parable, the budding fig tree, is not about the future prediction, the predictions about the future. What's going to happen in 2020 and 30 and 40. When does the last day would occur? No, we can't tell. by this parable. Parable was not told for that purpose. You know, many years ago, someone like just wrote a novel and books and saying that, okay, the end would come in 1988. A doomsday year, doomsday preachers, preach about the last day. They base their reasoning on this parable. They say budding fig tree, because fig tree is a symbol of Israel, right? So in 1948, you know what? Israel as a state was restored, right? Israel was formed, in other words, modern state of Israel. When? In 1948. So in this parable, Jesus says, this generation will not pass by until all things have taken place. So, one generation is 40 years. So this guy added, okay, 40 years, one generation. So 1948, restoration, budding fig tree time, and plus one generation, 40 years, and it comes 1988. But this thing never happened, right? He was a liar, but this is wrong. We can't read any parable or anything in the New Testament, even in the Revelation. We can't read to know what exactly, when exactly the last, day would occur. That's not the purpose. And as I said earlier, note, Luke does not limit a fig tree, okay? Does not say only about fig tree, but all trees, any tree. Okay? So the point is not Israel as a fig tree, okay? And Jesus also acknowledges that no one knows about the end time, including himself. So he's so humble. That's probably, right. He doesn't say that he knows everything. So what is the interpretation? How can you understand this parable? Well, we have to know, first of all, the natural metaphor here. What is that? A fig tree, the budding fig tree, or any trees. You see, right? Any trees, what will happen? There is a cycling of something season, right? In the spring, the sprouts and budding and leaves coming out, so that people know summer is near, okay? That's just kind of natural time. People know that automatically. Same way, Jesus asking, like that, you must know what time you live. Know the time in history that the end is near, right? So God will prevail in the end. So in times of such difficult times, people have to know, right? God will be with them. And until then, they should persevere and they should stay in the faith. That's probably what this parable is talking about. But one caution is that, as Jesus says, but about that day or hour, no one knows. No one knows. In other words, when is probably not very important, because you can live the future now. So watch out. For reflection, as I listed here, you may add your own. According to this parable, Jesus seems to be a strong apocalypticism advocate. Do you agree? But some suggest even this parable is not coming from the lips of Jesus. Rather, it's made up by the Evangelists or coming from some other source. In other words, some people say Jesus is not very strong apocalyptic prophet, like, talking about doomsday judgment, like a doomsday preacher. The end would come next week. Probably Jesus' primary, teaching is not about that kind of a doomsday, apocalyptic preaching, but rather the emphasis on the real world now, in the here, in the sense that God's rule should be realized in the hearts of people and in the world now. Obviously, Jesus, seemed to believe the future is coming. But nevertheless, the question is where he should place more emphasis, in the present or in the future. Should we expect the end of the world coming soon? Why or why not? What is the role of apocalyptic literature that deals with the last things? This parable may belong to, right, apocalyptic genre in a way. In the New Testament, we have Revelation, which is apocalyptic literature. But also this parable might be similar to that nature of, literature. What is the role of such genre literature? So this is the end of my presentation today, and this parable is very short one actually, okay? So still there is a debate going on. Some people say this parable is unlike, coming from Jesus, but other people say, yes, it's coming from Jesus because he seems to be apocalyptic preacher. Where you stand, you have to decide, but somehow from the evangelist perspective, from Mark, Matthew, and Luke, this parable certainly has a clear purpose because they can tell the audience, right, their communities, they should watch out. They should live their faith strong, in Jesus. Until the last day, they have to maintain their faith strong, believing that the end would come so soon. So there is a clear message. But when we think this parable, from the perspective of Jesus, right? The question is whether this is from Jesus or not. That's a matter of a question debate still going on. Thanks for watching, and I hope to come back with other parable and next time. Thank you, and bye-bye.